Hi everyone, my name is Fast Kareem, and I'm here to present you with Excel 2019 Power User. It's a pretty nifty e-learning class designed to show you some somewhat advanced features of Excel using the latest version of the software. So if you're an Office 365 user or an Excel 2019 user, you're in luck because this is the software we're using to cover these materials. Now there is a lot of great stuff to cover. Let me go ahead and show everyone what the outline entails and what we'll be covering today. Now I did break up the course into two separate modules, and the very first module will be focusing on our functions as well as some advanced pivot table techniques that we can use when building pivot tables, those summary reports. And once we feel comfortable with our VLOOKUPs and various text functions that we can use, including the index and match function too, we add that in there. We're gonna dive into module 2. And I wanna talk about something called array functions. I should call them Control-Shift-Enter functions instead. And I wanna show you some useful cases of when you can use something known as arrays, like when you wanna use index and match for multiple lookup values. And then from there, I'll go ahead and cover somewhat advanced conditional formats where we actually have to build the formula ourselves, and talk about the newest charts inside of Microsoft Excel. Now at the very end of this training, we will do a little cover of macros, how we can go ahead and add them to the ribbon, how we can go ahead and view the code, and maybe edit and save macros, which are small sets of computer instructions that use VBA, Visual Basic Application. I am pretty excited. I hope you are too. Now the thing about this course here, the Excel 2019 Power User, is I try my best to make it hands-on. Meaning I don't want you to just watch me for an hour and a half or so. I actually want you to pause my video occasionally and try out the things that I do. As you all know, we do have the exercise file in the description with the table of contents. So hopefully we have that exercise file, and when I ask you to pause the video or just give a certain thing a try, you can just pause that video. Don't forget to come back to me, but you can give it a try on your Excel just to get a hands-on feel. I'm pretty excited. I want to remind everybody this class is provided by Learnit, and my name is Faz, F-A-Z. Let's go ahead and begin. Hopefully you have the exercise file that's added to the description, because I'll be using it throughout the course, and it'd be nice to follow along if you have two monitors, or you can pause the video and start it back up when you're ready. But let's go ahead and start out with the very first topic of the day and spend a little time talking about the VLOOKUP function. In case you don't know, the V stands for vertical, because we can actually use a vertical column of information, like our employee IDs, in order to retrieve corresponding columns to the right-hand side of it. Like if I'm looking for an employee ID and I want to return the last name using this employee ID and my list of information on the bottom, I can go ahead and do that using the VLOOKUP. Now, the VLOOKUP does work, but there's a lot of rules and limitations and errors that can happen when using a VLOOKUP function. So once we do cover the VLOOKUP, I want to discuss the limitations of the VLOOKUP, and if you so happen to be an Office 365 user, I want to just go ahead and just swap it. I want to give a little example of how we can use the all-new XLOOKUP and compare the two. And then once we've compared the VLOOKUP to the XLOOKUP, what I want to do is I want to introduce a new function. It's actually two of them. It's the index and the match, to where we can go ahead and use index to index a particular column, and we can use match to return a row number, and together we'll go ahead and find the corresponding value that we need, like our last name, first name, department, or pay rate. So if you do have the newest version of Excel, you're in luck, because there's an all-new XLOOKUP that does somewhat alleviate a lot of those issues that we would have when doing a VLOOKUP. Now with that being said, let's go ahead and start out. Let me find my last name of my employee from this massive list using a VLOOKUP. Alrighty, I'm gonna put an equal, type in VL, and there's my VLOOKUP. Looks for the leftmost column of a table, and then it returns the value in the same row from a column that you specify. Now I'm gonna go ahead and click on Tab here to fill in the rest of the function for me. I just click the Tab key. And now my VLOOKUP is actually asking me for 4 different arguments. It's asking me for 4 different arguments. Now these 4 arguments, the very first one it's asking for is going to be called the lookup value. Now the lookup value does have a rule. It has to be the very first column of the table array. So whatever you're searching through and you're looking through, like this list, your lookup value must be the very first column. And in my case, since I'm using the employee ID, it's going to be the first column inside the data set. So I've satisfied that requirement. There's also going to be another requirement, and that actually happens with our table array. Now, with our second argument that we have, our table array, a table array is actually considered 2 or more columns of data. So if you're highlighting something that you're searching through, in order to use a VLOOKUP and to have a table array, you must have at least 2 columns of data. And I have 1 column here, I have 2 columns here, 3 columns, 4 columns, all the way up to 9. So I've definitely satisfied that requirement. It's looking good. Now, you're gonna notice that the very third argument that they have inside of a VLOOKUP is gonna be considered a column index number. Now that column index number is actually a number, and it's actually the position of the column that you want returned. So if you're looking for the last name or the first name, it's asking for the position of the column that you want returned. So if I'm looking for the last name, I'm gonna return position number 2. A lot of people mistake this with the letters and instead put a letter, but it has nothing to do with the placement of the columns on the spreadsheet, but it has everything to do with the actual table array and what we have highlighted. And in my case, I'm gonna be looking for the last name in my example. So I'll be looking for column number 2, which is gonna be a number, and I've satisfied that requirement. The final argument that we have, I'll do it in red to make it stand out, the range lookup there. Now you're gonna notice that with the range lookup, our final argument, the range underscore lookup, it's in brackets, which means that it's optional, but the default value, if you do not add something, is gonna be true. And true actually means an approximate match, to where if it doesn't find exactly what you're looking for, it will return something close to it. Now, keep in mind that you can also add in the word, or the number I should say, 1, which means true, just using Boolean logic, or you can put in the word false, which is probably the more common scenario in a VLOOKUP, where you want an exact match. Or you can put the number 0, which is the same thing as the word false. So as you can see, I'm sure you've heard there's a lot of issues with VLOOKUP. There's a lot of problems with it. It's because every single argument has a rule. Like, think about it. What if someone goes in here and they end up adding in a column? If they add in a column, all of your numbers will be shifted and your column index number will not be correct. So with that being said, now that we have the rules of our lookup value, our table array, our column index number, and our optional range lookup that defaults to true, wish they would have had it at false. Good thing they did that for the XLOOKUP. I just want to do a quick little example of filling out a VLOOKUP and finding the last name here. So with my VLOOKUP, I'm going to use my lookup value. I'm going to pick 1054 here. And that's actually going to satisfy my requirement because it's going to be in the first column that way. I'm using the first column of data, 1054, as my lookup value. That makes me happy. I'm going to hit comma to go over to the next parameter there, or the next argument I should call it. And from there, I'm going to highlight the actual table array, which we call 2 or more columns of data. And I always love using keyboard shortcuts wherever applicable. I'm going to use the Control and the Shift and the right arrow to go ahead and highlight all the way to the right. And then I'm going to use Control, Shift, and down to highlight all the way down and grab my entire data set. Control, Shift to the right, Control, Shift down. And just to follow the best practice rule that Microsoft likes us to, I'm going to absolute reference my entire table array. So that way if I do move it or copy and paste the cells, the table array will be fixed and those cells will be maintained. And we all know, hopefully, that the keyboard shortcut to absolute reference something is clicking on your F4 key there. I'm gonna give that a click. And just like that, I've absolute referenced it, adding in my dollar signs before the letters and before the numbers for my cell addresses, locking them in place. Wonderful. I'm gonna hit a comma here, and now that I have my table array, it's 2 or more columns, I've absolute referenced it, best practice. I'm gonna use a column index number, which is the number 2, to return the last name. Now from here, because I actually want to return the correct person's last name, I'm going to make sure to choose false or put the number 0 as the last parameter, because otherwise it's going to default to true if you leave it blank. Cool, put the word false in there, and I'm going to close my parenthesis. Now, in order to stay on the same cell and actually enter in the value to stay on the cell, I'm going to hit Control and then the Enter at the same time, and that's going to enter in that formula or that function for me to where I can see the result is Smith. Now from there, I can go ahead and check. I left the first one there just to do a quick check. And as you can see, we have found Smith, the last name, for the employee ID 1054. You know, I do want you to try this. I mean, it'd be helpful if you do try it, and we have the exercise file available. How about you pause my video and just try filling out a VLOOKUP function? And if you have to look at the video, I have the code right here. I have the line of code, the function for you. But try to see if you can figure it out logically using your 4 parameters or those arguments that we discussed and the rules that we just discussed. Give that a try. Don't forget to press play again. Have fun. I was worried. I thought you wouldn't press play again. Welcome back though. So with that being said, now that we've covered the VLOOKUP, what I want to do is add a little extension to it. Because if an employee ID is not found, like let's say we have an employee ID like 999, which does not exist, I want it to actually say not in list. Because as we all know, Microsoft does have error codes, but some people don't know what they mean, and some people might be a little confused when they see NA or not available as an error code with the pound signs in there. So in order to alleviate this issue of people not understanding error codes, what I want to do is I just want to use a secondary function, and it's going to be known as IFERROR. And from there, I can go ahead and give it a special function. The argument's called value, like the VLOOKUP. And then I can give it another argument, and it's going to be called value if error. And what this is actually going to do is it's going to replace, I know I missed the E there, it's going to end up replacing whatever error code it gives you with whatever piece of text or string, I should call it, that you've added to that parameter or argument. Let me add that to my VLOOKUP, and then I want you to pause the video and add it to your VLOOKUP. This is a secondary step we have to do with VLOOKUP to deal with error checking. I'm going to go into the function there, and right in front of the VLOOKUP, I'm going to add in my secondary function, my IFERROR, that returns a value IFERROR if the expression, my function, is an error. I'm going to click Tab to fill in my IFERROR function. And at the very moment, I've just given it my very first value, which is the VLOOKUP. That's the expression. So when I hit comma, it's going to move over to the value of error. That's why it's bold. And I'm going to end up putting not in list, making sure to include the open quote and the end quote so that Excel knows that this is a string of characters. And I'm going to close my parenthesis because I have a second function in. So now that I've just done this, and I've added in the IFERROR, and I've nested it in with the VLOOKUP for error checking, I want you to give it a try. Now, with that being said, do try it out without actually looking at the video and looking at the code and just copying it. And if you can't, peek over, pause the video, of course, and peek over. I have the code right on the screen. And then come right back when you're done. Welcome back. Hopefully you're successful at adding in that IFERROR. However, in April, I believe around April of 2019 or maybe 2020, I'm not sure, they actually rolled out the all-new XLOOKUP function to where we can actually use another function known as XLOOKUP that might alleviate all those troubleshooting issues and those rules that we have to follow for the arguments. Now, in order to find the first name with this employee ID, I want to just do a quick little example of an XLOOKUP, but keep in mind that XLOOKUP is uniquely and only available for our Office 365 users that pay for that subscription that Microsoft provides. Pretty good bang for your buck. Now I'm going to go ahead and for my first name, use the all-new XLOOKUP. Now the XLOOKUP actually has quite a few parameters, or arguments I should call them, but there's only 3 that are really needed. And in fact, if you're an old school Excel user, you're familiar with this. You've used the lookup function back in the day, where you had a lookup vector and a return vector. They're actually following the same algorithm in the XLOOKUP. Let me explain. Now as you can see, with my lookup value, everything seems smooth. We all know what that is. I'm going to go ahead and just select the 1054 here. But with XLOOKUP, it actually does not matter whether or not it's the first column. That rule is eliminated now because we have a lookup array and a return array that we can search through. Now I'm going to hit comma over here. And now that I'm at my lookup array, we realize that a table array is 2 columns of data, but a lookup array is simply 1. And all Excel is asking for is where it can find the value that matches B4. And I'm just going to give it that column. It doesn't matter where the column actually lives, but I'm going to give it the column employee ID, and I'm going to use the shortcut Control-Shift-Down to go ahead and highlight it. And as always, I'm going to absolute reference by hitting F4 on the top row of my keyboard, adding in my $signs. Now that we've given Excel a lookup value and what to search through, what I'm going to do here now is give it a return array, which is actually a column of data that I want to use to return. And whatever matches my lookup value, it's going to be returned because they're going to be on the same row. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my return array. And since I'm looking for the first name, I want to return a first name. I'm going to highlight down this column here. And of course, absolute reference for a best practice there. Now it knows what to search for, B4, and it knows what to search through, and it knows what column of data I'm looking for, the first names. Now, for that very last parameter, the if not found, that's an optional parameter. And if not found actually eliminates the use of if error. So where if it's not in the list, you could end up typing it in, not in list. And then instead of adding in a secondary function, you can have it all conjoined into one. Now this XLOOKUP will always search for an exact match, unless you specify another setting like -1, 1, or 2 for the match mode. We're not going to go that far with XLOOKUP. We don't need to. They're optional. I'm just going to close my parenthesis here. And now that you've seen it, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, or I should say Control Enter, to show you that it returns the first name, just how my VLOOKUP returned my last name. Except that it does it all in one, eliminating a lot of those painstaking rules we have to follow and memorize with the VLOOKUP. Keep in mind that it is a faster function in computer time, because it doesn't really have to highlight and grab the entire data set. It just grabs the columns that it needs and the data you're looking as a reference point. Pause this video, give it a try. Don't forget to come back, because we still have some good stuff to cover with index and match and comparing the three now. Alrighty. Hope you had a little fun taking a look at the VLOOKUP and your XLOOKUP that we just did. Now that we've done these two, what I want to focus on is index and match. Now I'm using a different employee ID number, the one below it, but I want to use index and match to return the last name. Another function that does the same thing, but a different set of rules. Now the thing about index and match is that it's actually two separate functions. There's an index function and there's a match function. And when you put these two things together, match returns a row number and index will give you that row number that you have indexed and highlighted. Now, I'm going to go ahead and point out that indexing is a pretty technical term, and typically you index what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a last name, I would say I'm indexing what I'm looking for. And when you do index, a very easy way to see this is that when you index something, you can just see it as you're putting a number next to the cell. You're just putting a number. Maybe like the number 1 for the last name, Smith, the number 2 for Gonzalez, the number 3, and the number 4. You're just adding a number to each one of these values. So the index function, when you give it a column, it's going to end up adding a number next to it. And then instead of giving it a row number, which is the argument it's asking for, we're going to feed it the match function. Now this match function is actually going to help us find the row number. The match function is going to end up asking for a lookup value. Kind of like what the VLOOKUP did, but backwards. A lookup value, it's asking for it now. And it's going to ask for a lookup array. Is exactly where it can search, what column of data it can search to find that value. So my lookup value would obviously be my employee ID, and my lookup array would obviously be this column of data. Now what ends up happening is your match is going to go down this column, and it's going to search for a match that matches your employee ID. And once it ends up finding 1056 inside of this column, it's going to realize that that's going to be on row 2. It's going to be in position 2 of this column here, position 2. Or I should say 3 because I have the header highlighted. But what's going to happening is now, when we end up having our index with the column inside of it and position 2, it's going to return position 2 of the column we have indexed, ultimately spitting out Gonzalez. It's going to spit out Gonzalez right there for that. This is how the algorithm works. Now that we've described it, how about we see it? Let me demonstrate it for you. Now I'm going to use the index function. I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to index what I'm looking for here. It's asking for an array, a column of data. And I'm going to index the last name since I'm looking for my last names. I'm going to hit Control-Shift down and just hit F4 on my keyboard to absolute reference that value. And when I hit comma, since I do not know the row number, I'm going to end up adding in a match function that returns a position of an item inside of an array, inside of a column. Now when I choose this lookup value, I'm going to choose 1056 here, hit comma, and now it's asking for a lookup array of where it can find this value. I'll go ahead and choose 1054 and hit Control-Shift down. And then from there, of course, click F4, put it back up, and absolute reference it. Now the final parameter is an optional one, but this is actually our match types. And I'm going to go ahead and default it and put it to an exact match by adding in the number 0 at the end, so that I will look exactly for what I'm looking for and return nothing else otherwise. I don't want a greater than value or a less than value, otherwise I'd use 1 or -1. Now I'm going to close out my match function, and because I have a red parenthesis at the end, that means I'm missing 1. So I'm going to go ahead and close out my index function. And now that I have an index column that I'm looking for, I have a match function that has a lookup value and a lookup array. It can complete the algorithm because match will return 2, and the index will return the second position of the index column. I'm going to hit Control-Enter to put that answer in, where we have Gonzalez. And now that you've seen it, I want you to just pause this video and try out filling out your index and match. And if you need a little help and guidance, take a peek at this screen because I have the code right there. Try it out, pause it, just don't forget to come back. Now that we spent a little bit of time covering VLOOKUP, all new XLOOKUP, and index and match, what I want to do here is spend a little time talking about functions, but text functions. I want to switch gears from database functions to text functions, so that we can pull more data and derive more data from the pre-existing data that we already have. That way, if we have a pivot table, we have a lot of data that we can use to summarize and find our values that we're looking for. Now, the very first thing that I want to do here is I want to add in the payroll period. And I'm just going to use this as an example to teach about a function called equal today. And it's always just going to return the current date. The current date. So if you open this tomorrow, it would say the date for tomorrow. So right now, when I put that in, it's going to give me the current date. And it's always going to stay current because it's equal to today. Alternatively, if you want to actually put in the date but not have it change every time the date changes, you can go ahead and use the control key and a semicolon. That'll add in the date, but it'll be static, and it'll no longer change. Control, semicolon. There it is. Now that I have the date in there, my payroll period ending date, what I want to do is I want to derive more data from this list of information. I want to figure out how many full-time employees I have and how many part-time employees I have. And from the hire date, I also want to pull out the year of hire to see how many employees I'm hiring per year. And I want to get a little bit more granular and add in the months as well, so I can see what month am I hiring the most employees and what year as well that goes along with that. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good text functions. Let's start out by finding our full-time and part-time employees using the information that we already have, like maybe the hours worked. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to use a very nifty function. It's going to be known as the if function. If, where it checks whether a condition is met, whether this is above or below 40, and it returns whether a value is true, or if it's false, I can return something else. Now with the if statement, the if function, I'm going to give it a logical test, and I'm going to compare H5, the cell with the number in it, See if it's greater than or equal to 40. Now when I hit comma, you're going to notice that the value if true is asking for a replacement. So if this happens to be true, what do you want us to do? And in my case, I just want us to write out the text full-time in an open and close quote. And if they're not full-time, that obviously implies that they are part-time. So I'm going to put part-time as the value if false. I'm going to close the parenthesis. Now from there, what I'm going to do here is hit Control and Enter. And to save my time, I'm going to use the autofill handle. I'm going to see that skinny black crosshair. And I'm going to do 2 clicks, 1, 2, to complete the rest of the formulas for me. Pretty nifty, pretty nifty. Now what I want to do here, besides finding out whether they're full-time or part-time, is I want to figure out the year of hire. And I so happen to have a hire date column. And from there, I'm going to use a text function known as year. And as long as you give it a serial number, which basically means a cell that has a date, it's going to spit out the year portion of the date. So that's 2001, and I'm going to go ahead and double-click autofill to complete the rest of my values. Now for this final one, we're going to kind of put concepts together. The concept of concatenation and the concept of using month and year as functions. So what I'm going to do is, just like we had a function called year, we're also going to have one called month. And when we go ahead and select the hire date, it's going to give us just the month portion. But I also want to add in the year, maybe a symbol like a slash. And I'm just going to go ahead and put an ampersand. And then in quotes, put a little slash and another ampersand. And then I'm going to add in the year function as well. So that way I can go ahead and select F5 again and pull out just the year. So it'd be the month, and then it's going to go ahead and ignore the ampersands, and it's going to add the slash, and then it's going to go ahead and give you the year from the cells. I'm going to hit Control Enter. 12/2001 seems correct. Now I'm going to double click going down to pull the months and the years from each one of these data points. Now keep in mind that I have left a little tips and guidance, tips and tricks here that you can use in case you do need them. But like the usual, how about you pause the video and give these 3 columns a stab. Give it a try and come right back. All right, welcome back. So far we've covered our database functions and our text functions. What if we want to learn a little bit about a pivot table and some advanced techniques that we have when a pivot table is built? Now I'm going to quickly build a pivot table just to show some basics of building pivot tables and best practices. And I'm going to use the complete data worksheet, which is some order details that I have for 2014. A bunch of salespeople, revenue, and the products they're selling. Now I just want to figure out who's my top and my bottom seller, and I want to maybe give them the bonus that they deserve, which is 5% of their sales. Now I'm going to do this, and the very first thing I'm going to do in order to convert this to a pivot table is I'm going to create a table. Because that way I won't have to expand the data source if I add more rows to the bottom, since it has a table. And tables have nomenclature, and they automatically expand themselves. In order to do that, I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut known as Control-T. Control and the letter T, and I'll create the table for me. And I'm just going to make sure that my green cell address box is inside the table, which it is, which makes me happy. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-T. And now that I have the Create Table dialog box, I'm going to make sure that the option for my headers was selected, because I see that it's picked that up too. And I'm going to hit OK. Wonderful. We have the table. We like doing this before building pivot tables. And if you haven't, you can go back and make them into tables. You can make the source data into tables. And from there, I'm going to go to the Design tab that the table has brought me once it's selected. And I'm just going to give it a proper name, because I always like naming things. Because in the future, I might end up uploading this to Power Pivot or Tableau or Power BI, and I want my tables to have names for whoever's going to build that dashboard for me. Now I'm going to go ahead and call this the table 14 sales, all in one word because it has to be. Table 14 sales. Inside the properties there, table 14 sales. Now from here, I want to go ahead and insert a pivot table, but I do want to point out that inside the Insert tab, where we go to Insert Things, you're going to notice that we have a recommended pivot table option. And this, I believe, was introduced in 2013, maybe 2016. And it's going to give you a list of basic pivot tables that you might want to use to go ahead and just start as a good starting base. I'm just going to build one from scratch just to show you how it's done. and maybe learn about some advanced features that come equipped with PivotTables once it's built. I'm going to choose PivotTable there. And I'm going to just put it on a new worksheet. I'm not using external data sources or a data model. I'm going to hit OK. Great. Now that I have this new worksheet, I'm just going to give it a proper name. I'm just going to call it PT1 or Pivot Table 1. What I like to do with my pivot tables, since I have Office 365, is I like to get the field list and I like to rearrange it a little bit to make my life easier when building a pivot table. If you have a Mac, you won't have this option. But if I have a PC, I can switch my field area and my field boxes, and I can go ahead and have them side by side. That will eliminate this massive scroll bar. I'm going to do that. Perfect. I'm also going to go ahead and go back to my toolbox and make this into alphabetical order, because this is not in alphabetical order right now. I want it to be in alphabetical order. And from there, I'm going to choose A to Z. And now I've set up my pivot table, the area where I build it, to be convenient to me as I drag and drop these fields into the buckets that I want them to go to. Now, I'm going to build a salesperson pivot table to show the revenue that the salespeople are bringing in by just dragging the salesperson into rows. And I'm going to just drag the revenue into the values box. Now, with this pivot table that I have built, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a filtering tool where I can filter based off the regions to the very top. Now, although this looks like a complete pivot table, I mean, it's pretty complete. We have our salespeople, our revenue. There are some best practices that you can follow. Like, one thing I like to do with the pivot table is I like to right-click it, and I like to have it sorted so that way if I add new values, those values will be coming out sorted since I've sorted the pivot table column itself. Alrighty. Way to go, Nancy. We're getting there, Jan. She's new. So, sorting it is a great deal, and I don't really care about these decimal places. It's not a big deal to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to change the number format of the sum of revenue by changing the number format with a right-click. And I just want to make it into currency, but I want to get rid of the decimal places there to 0 and hit OK. Wonderful. Looking clean. However, I do like using the modern tools, and with our modern tools, we now have a new way to filter our pivot tables. And I don't like to get rid of the filter area, but I like to add in something called a slicer that we can use as a visual filter for our pivot tables. I'm going to go ahead and choose a slicer to filter my regions, and I'm going to hit OK. Now from here, I have a nice little filter that I can use to filter my pivot table, and the value shows up right up top as well. I'm going to clear this filter here. What we did was we made our table, or our list, into a table, and then we gave it a name, and then from there we inserted a pivot table. And we ended up building a pivot table that showed us the sum of our revenue that each salesperson is bringing in, based off the criteria that we've added in to each one of these fields that we have in our pivot table. I do want you to try building this pivot table using the complete data worksheet, using the best practices, naming your table, using the shortcuts. And once you have it built, and you have the slicer added in from the Analyze tab, go ahead and come right back where we can talk about building calculated fields, building calculated items, and even changing the values and how they're displayed in the pivot table. Alright, welcome back. Hopefully we got the basics of building a pivot table. And if that felt like it was a little bit too complex for you, I do want to let everyone know that in our Learnit YouTube channel, we have a whole course on Excel pivot tables that I put together, which will give you a rundown of what we just did really quickly in 6 minutes in a much more digestible, broken down way, because the whole course is on pivot tables. Definitely check it out after this course. Now, what I want to do here with this pivot table is I want to add in a very special column called bonus, because I want to end up giving my salespeople 5% of their yearly sales as a bonus for helping me out there. Now, although I see a lot of individuals who end up building a column like so, and they multiply it with 5%, and they end up dragging down, I'm sure some of us are guilty of doing something like this. This is not a best practice. This data is not going to be kept inside the pivot table, And it doesn't make it better when people format it to make it look like it's part of the pivot table. It doesn't make it better at all. So what I would rather do is take advantage of some advanced pivot table tools, and they're going to be known as calculated fields and items. And we can access that from our Analyze tab. Now, inside of our Analyze tab, you're going to notice that we have an option to use calculated fields, items, and sets. Now, in order for us to actually use both options, a field and an item, we have to be having an item selected. These are items, these are fields. And I have an item selected, which is part of one of my fields. It's the salesperson field. And from there, you're going to go ahead and notice that I have a calculated field and calculated item available for me. Now I'm going to go ahead and build a calculated field using the sum of revenue, and I'm going to add a bonus column by multiplying it by 5%. Now for this bonus column, I'm going to call the field itself bonus, and I'm just going to build a formula on the bottom here, the formula portion, and I'm just going to add in the revenue, and I'm going to insert the field, and I'm going to multiply it by 5% just so I can get a 5% bonus that I want to deliver. Now I'm going to hit OK. Alrighty, it was just letting us know that I was replacing that formatted cell. Totally fine. But now that we have that there, you're going to see that the sum of bonus has been popped up. And from there, we now have a bonus field that we have magically added in. Calculated fields are beneficial because now we have the field inside the pivot table for usage, but it will not show up inside the spreadsheet. Keep that in mind. So definitely try this out. Go into your pivot table items, go over to your Analyze tab, and try adding in a calculated field for your bonuses there. Now keep in mind that the bonus formula is quite simple. And if you do need to take a look at it, it's just our revenue column that we inserted, multiplied by 5%. I don't need to modify it, but in case you need to look at it, here it is on the screen. Give it a pause, give it a try, and come right back. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a little fun adding in the sum of bonus there as a calculated field, but now let's focus on the items. Because I actually want to get Nancy and Ann, and they're actually partners. They're a part of our Team 1. They're part of the T1 team. And I want to group them together because that's typically how we acknowledge our salespeople within groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a calculated item. And in that calculated item, I'm going to make sure that I have an item selected. And from there, I'm going to go to Field, Item, and Sets and choose Calculated Item, which is pretty much the same thing as building a field, but more granular, of course. And I'm going to go ahead and call this Team 1. And I'm just going to add in the salespeople that I want to add for my formula. And I just chose Nancy and Ann because they're the first. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Nancy and insert Nancy in. And I'm going to use a plus sign there for the formula. And I'm going to insert Ann's values as well and hit add. Now when I hit OK, you're going to see that a new field, a new item I should call it, has been added into my pivot table. Now you're going to realize that your values increased because you've doubled up, because you've added these two together and you put it on top. It's very important to go to the filter inside of your row labels and to filter off those values that you just bundled together so that they're not included in the totaling twice. Go ahead and try building a calculated item. I'm going to go ahead and continue on building my Andrew and Maria and Laura and Michael and Robert and Jan, Team 2 and Team 3 and Team 4. And I'm going to be filtering them off as I go along. I'm going to go ahead and do Andrew and Mariah right over here now really quickly, a calculated item, and I'm going to call them Team 2. And from the insert area, I'm going to choose the formula, and I'm going to choose Andrew and insert the field, choose Andrew and insert the item, and I'm going to go ahead and choose Mariah there and add their values together for Team 2. Now, when I hit OK, you're going to see that I have Team 2, but it's very important to remember to filter off these additional names like Andrew and Mariah and hit OK. Go ahead and pause the video and try that out and complete all 4 teams there and press play again. Don't forget to press play. Alrighty. Now that we've done this, we've done a calculated item, we've done a calculated field. What I want to do is somewhat modify the revenue because I don't want to show the exact number. I actually just want to show a percentage. I want to show, compared to the grand total, what percent is each team bringing in compared to the sales, so we can see which team is pulling most of the work. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to go over to the sum of revenue from the values box, and I'm going to change the value field settings. And these value field settings, instead of summarizing the values, I want to show them, and I want to show them as a percentage of the grand total. I'm just going to go ahead and rename that new column to the percentage of total up top. And when I hit OK, you're going to notice that we have a breakdown of percentages now instead. And if you do need to change that back to the sum of revenue, you can always go back to the value field settings and change it back to sum and hit OK. But I prefer to see a percentage instead. Go ahead and give that a try. Pause this video and try changing the value field settings of the percentage of the total there, of the revenue, and change it to the percent of the total. Alrighty. Now, a very useful area of Excel that I don't see a lot of people playing around with are array formulas or array functions, more commonly known as Control-Shift-Enter formulas or functions, allowing us to do columns at a time. Let me explain what I mean here. Now, right over here I have the sold, how many units I've sold so far, and the price of my certain cars that I have. And I just want to figure out the sales for each one of these and what's the total sales that I've brought in based off how many types of cars that I've sold. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to use an array formula to go ahead and highlight these cells that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and select the very first column, and I'm going to multiply it to this next column here. And what it's going to end up doing, it's going to go row by row. It's going to multiply this and spit out the answer here. Multiply this and this, split out it here, and so on and so forth. This is known as an array formula, since we're using a formula here. And what I'm going to do here is hit Control, Shift, and Enter to put in the calculation. You're going to notice that each one of these values are different because we are doing it for the corresponding rows. And you can't actually update these values because you can't change one specific part of the array. It's incorporated to the entire thing. I'm going to hit Cancel here. Go ahead and try that out. Try building yourself an array formula. And a very important takeaway is every time you go inside of it, don't forget to hit Control, Shift, and Enter to put the answer back in. Control, Shift, Enter. Go ahead and pause the video. Go ahead and fill out the sales column and come right back for us to find the grand total. Now, what I'm going to do here for our grand total is I'm going to use an array function to find our grand total. I'm going to use the sum function. And with the sum, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and sum up this column multiplied by this column right over here so that I can go ahead and get the sum here for myself. Now go ahead and try pausing this video and try using an array formula there as a sum. Control, Shift, Enter, so we can go ahead and see the corresponding answer. And come right back. Up next, we'll see how we can use this property of array formulas and array functions in an index and match with multiple search criterias. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a little fun playing around with our array formulas and getting a little intro to them in our previous example there. Now that we have this concept down, let's see how we can use it to find an index and match with a multiple criteria. So over here, I'm looking for a certain t-shirt that meets a certain large size and a certain color. And as you can see, there's only one of those options in my inventory that matches it. So what I need to do is I need to use an array function version of my index and match to go ahead and go through each one of these columns and find the matching value. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to use an index and match. I've done one here over here, but I'm going to do one over here for my t-shirts that are medium and are the color blue so that I can find out the $16 price over here. Now, in order to do that, we all got to remember that when we index something, we typically index what we're looking for. So when I index my price column, I'm indexing that because that is what I am looking for. And I'm going to hit a comma. Now, once I go ahead and use my match function, I'm always going to match this to the number 1 because the number 1 means true. That means true. And we're going to use true and false to solve this. Ones and zeros. 0 means false. I'm going to hit 1 over here. And I want to go ahead and use a lookup array, but it's a little bit different this time since we have 3 different columns that we want to look through. Now the very first lookup array, I'm going to put it in parentheses here. It's going to be 1 together, but I'm going to go look for the color blue inside of the blue column. Looking for the color blue inside of the blue column. And then I'm going to multiply it. I'm going to multiply it to my next criteria. My medium sizes is equal to somewhere in this column. Just multiplying it, I'm going to close that parenthesis, and I'm going to multiply it again. The stars multiply, and then I'm going to look for the t-shirt size is equal to somewhere inside of this column. Now when I close my parenthesis here, I'm going to close it one more time. I'm going to make sure to look for an exact match for my match, and I'm going to close out the index. So what's actually happening here, let me explain the algorithm, is your match function is looking for the number 1. And these are all multiplying to each other. Each one of your columns are going to be multiplied to each other. And it's going to go down the columns, and then it's going to search for t-shirts first. Let's start out from the top. And anytime it sees the word t-shirt in this column, it's going to put the number 1. The number 1 is going to be placed all down this column. And anywhere it doesn't see the word t-shirt, you're going to see the number 0. Now it's going to do the same thing for the medium size. It's going to go down, it's going to put a 0 over everything that is not medium. It's just going to put a 0, 0. It's just going to put medium, 0, 0. Now the final column that it's going to do is going to look for colors here. And it's going to look down this column, and everywhere it sees the color blue, it's going to add the number 1. And now we're going to hit 0, 0, 0. Oh, the number 1 again, I apologize, not 0. 0 and 0. And what ends up happening here is it ends up multiplying. These columns are being multiplied, as you can see. They're being multiplied. So anytime it multiplies these, one of the values are either going to be 0 or they're going to be 1. That's going to be 0. That's going to be 1. 1 times 1 times 1. This one's going to be 0. All the rest of them, in fact, are going to be 0 going all the way down. Because we have found our exact match using these 3 values. Because the 1 and the 1 and the 1 equal to 1 multiplied to each other. Now in order to complete this formula here, now that I know I have found the value, that's just me describing the algorithm, I'm happy. I'm going to make sure to close out my index function here, and I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and Enter to put in that answer. Now before we do this, and I have you try it out, I want to do it one more time just to give you a closer look at what I'm doing there. I'm just going to index what I'm looking for. I'm going to index the price column. And then when I go ahead and I match it, I end up matching it to the number 1. And every single column I go down, I end up searching. I'm going to search for our hoodie first, and I'm going to look for it inside of the item column. And of course, I'm going to multiply it too, and I'm going to look for our sizes, and I'm going to look inside the size column. And I'm going to multiply it again, and I'm going to put it in parentheses just to show association. I'm going to look for the color black there, and I'm going to look inside the color column. And now when I close this parenthesis, I'm going to make sure to look for an exact match so it doesn't find me something close to what I'm looking for. I'm going to close out my match function, and I'm going to close out my index function. I'm going to make sure to hit Control, Shift, and Enter to put in that price point there. I just found out that a hoodie that is large and that is black, a hoodie that is large and that is black will end up being $30. Pretty nifty, pretty nifty. We're using something called Boolean logic, true and false values. What I want you to do is give this a try, of course. I'll leave the formula here, but always remember that you have to still hit Control and Shift and Enter every time you put this in. Every time you open it and put it in, but go ahead and give this a try on this last example here. And come right back. Just give me a pause and come right back. Welcome back, everybody. Now that we spent some time covering some array formulas, let's talk about some advanced conditional formats. As we all know by now, we can go to our Home tab and use our built-in conditional formats. But it's nice to know that you can actually use your own formulas and build your own new rules with conditional formats. Like maybe a rule to hide any error codes inside of a column. I'm going to go ahead and use a conditional format for these values, and I'm going to build a new rule using this formula, the ISERROR. I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. I'm going to use the ISERROR. And I'm just going to make it equal to C2 there. And if it so happens to meet that criteria, I just want to get the font color over here, and I want to make it over to white. And I'm going to hit okie dokie to hide that value there. Seems pretty smooth, but I do have quite a few examples that I want to show you. So let's move on to the next one. Let's flip the page. Let's flip the page. I'm going to use the Control key and the page down key. Page down, and it's going to flip the page. If I'm on a laptop, I might have to hold the F and N key. Control page down. And now when I zoom in here, I want to hide the duplicate values inside of my data set. Now, I'm going to hide the duplicate regions that I have, kind of what a pivot table does for us. And I'm going to go over to a conditional format, and I'm going to build a new rule with this data set selected. And if it so happens to be equal to the bottom cell, I want to make it into a white font. So if A2 is equal to A1, I want it to format over to a nice font that can't be seen, which is white. Now I'm going to hit OK. Now keep in mind these values are still there. If you color this, you can still see them. It's just that we hid them with a white font. And that your data set does have to be sorted with that appropriate column that we'd like in that formula. I'm going to hit Control page down and move on to the next, to formatting entire rows. Because what we can do, instead of highlighting just one cell in a row, because maybe I want to figure out when my units are above 75 or below 75, I can go ahead and highlight the entire columns, multiple columns. And when I go to my conditional formatting and build a new rule, I can end up using a rule that uses something known as absolute referencing. I'm just going to equal in the $sign. I'm going to put the $sign to lock in column B. That's what I want to search through. But I will not lock row 2. And I'm going to compare it to 75. So that way, whatever it highlights, it'll highlight row 2 going all the way across there. But column B is going to be fixed to search for 75. I'm going to format this to a nice color blue like it's requested and hit OK. Now keep in mind, even if you update these values, that 75 has to be 76 to hit it. You'll go ahead and see that it changes the conditional format to keep you up to date. Now, if you do ever want to change the color of this conditional format, just re-highlight the data set and just manage your rules. Maybe you didn't like this blue color, you can always edit the rule, and if you'd like, you can reformat the color scheme there, and maybe we can make it green for Excel a little bit. Yeah? Boom. Green. One more example, and although we have tables that can do this for us, it's nice to know that you can have an even or odd number row colored. So with this data set that I have, I'm going to hit Control and the letter A to highlight it all. And as you can see, we end up having these functions written out for you in the exercise book. We're going to be using something known as a modulus. If you don't know what a modulus is, it's basically the remainder of a function, or a division, I should say. You divide something and you have a remainder, that's the modulus of it. And I'm going to use this formula, the modulus formula, to determine anytime it's equal to 1, there's a remainder, that means it's odd. I want to make sure that this number of rows is going to be highlighted. It's going to highlight all my odd numbered rows with a certain color that I'd like. Now I'm going to do that by just copying this formula here, just copy the formula, and with this data set that I have selected, I'm going to go to my Home tab and choose Conditional Formatting and choose a new rule. Now with this new rule here, I'm just going to paste in the formula that I provided, which will just do the odd numbers. I can do other variations if I'd like, but I'm going to hit OK. Before I do that, let me format it to the color green, and I'll hit OK there. Now as you can see, we went ahead and formatted just the odd numbered rows, 5, 7, 9. But in case you want to change this formula, maybe you want to just do the 5s and 10s, keep in mind you can always edit these rules if you re-highlight the data and go back to conditional formatting and manage the rule. I can edit the rule and even change the entire formula inside of the rule there as well. And now it's just every 5, 10, 15, and 20, every multiple of 5 there. Go ahead and try this out, pause the video, and just try out filling out these examples. There's a lot of tips in there. I've left the little formulas for you for each one of these. But give it a try for these conditional formats, and make sure to build a new rule for each one of these. Come right back. So we spent a little bit of time talking about pivot tables, conditional formats, array formulas. How about we talk about charts, our visuals? Because 65% of us are visually based. And I'm over here on the sheet called Charting 1, and I'm actually looking at our salesperson data with the weekly sales and the average sales that they brought in. Now, what we can do is we can always insert visuals. We can always go to the Insert tab and choose to pick a recommended chart. And if you have the newest version of the software and you're on a PC, you can also click on the Quick Analysis tool and insert a chart from here. It's both the same thing. But I always like using keyboard shortcuts, and my favorite keyboard shortcut, of course, would be the Chart shortcut to go ahead and insert a chart on the spreadsheet based off the data you have selected. You might have to hold the F and N key if you're on a laptop, but I'm going to hit Alt and F1 here, and it's going to pop up a chart for this data set that I have. Now, in case you do want to organize and rearrange this data chart, you can switch the design of the chart. And one thing that I want to do is I want to switch the rows and the columns. So I'm going to click on that, and now I can see the rows and the columns are switched. Now, something that would be very beneficial to have is if our average, this last column that we have, would be actually a line going across the bars. So from there, I'm going to go and click on the chart, and I'm going to go to the Design tab of the chart, and I'm going to change the chart type. Because inside of the newest version of Excel, we actually have quite a few new chart types that we have access to, and one of them being a combo chart. A combo chart is a quick way of rigging up multiple chart types into one chart. And I'm just going to make sure that that week 4 is also going to be a column there. And I'm just going to get my average, and leave it as a line. Cluster column, looking good, and I'm going to hit OK. Now I can see that my average is going across as a line, and everything else is the bars that I have available. Now, since this is on the same spreadsheet, I'm going to use the chart elements plus sign, and I'm just going to remove the chart title since it's already on the spreadsheet. And if I want, I can get rid of the grid lines to make it easier and more simplistic to look at. And I'm just going to move the legend over to the top of the screen since that's the first thing people typically like to look at, the top of the chart. Looking smooth, looking smooth. Keep in mind if I wanted to change the overall color scheme of my chart, maybe make it match Excel with the monochromatic green, I can do that from the paintbrush. And if I want to filter off the average, I can also do that as well and apply it and hide the average. Now these are charts, and what I just introduced before I filtered it was a combination chart, where we can add multiple chart types and rig them up. As long as you have a chart, you can always change your chart types, and you can always choose the combo chart to rig up a combination chart of your liking. Now charts are useful, but there's also one other type of chart that I don't want you to pass up called Sparklines. I'm going to hit Control Page Down really quick. And what I want to do is I want to show a trend on this data. So I'm going to highlight the sales data from May to October. And from here, I'm going to insert. I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to choose a Sparkline. Sparkline. Keep in mind, you can also do this option from conditional formatting. But if you're on a Mac, you won't have this available to you. I'm going to go ahead and choose the line option up top. And I'm going to choose the Sparkline to go directly next to the column that I'm relating it to. And I'm going to hit OK. Now that I have this Sparkline, I'm going to go ahead and add in some marker colors. I'm going to select the cell. I'm going to go to the Design tab and add some marker colors to show the highest point in my data set with a green marker. And I'm also going to show the lowest point with a red mark there as well. And there's my lowest point. Now keep in mind, you can change the color of the overall line itself too. I'll make it a little lighter to make the color stand out there. And I'll change the marker colors there as well for my high point back to a nice dark green. And I'll change my color point there back to my lowest point to a nice red to stand out. Now alternatively, you can use a column Sparkline. You can change the type of Sparkline, and it shows columns instead. Or you can use a win-loss. Now win-loss will update you if you have a negative value inside with a little equator line showing the bar below the equator. Now keep in mind, Sparklines can be used with autofill, where you can drag down and it shows the rest of the data points with the corresponding columns. I like to use these when I have a lot of data points to show, like my salespeople, versus just having a small list of salespeople and their weekly sales that I'm analyzing. Now go ahead and try out these two sheets. Try using Charting 1, and try using Alt and F1 to use the shortcut and rig it up to a combo chart. And I also want you to try adding in a sparkline and maybe seeing the column version of it, or maybe seeing the win-loss version of it once the settings are in play with the design tab that you have once it's there. Give this video a pause. You can go back and watch the video again if you need to see those little pieces, but definitely do try these goodies out before we cover some macros. All right, now we're going to cover something that's somewhat advanced. It's a pretty big world of Excel. It's called macros. Now, macros are a small set of computer instructions by definition, if you look that up. But with Excel, we use this very special programming language called VBA. It stands for Visual Basic Application. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to record ourselves doing something in Excel, and then we can see the code that has been written out for us in VBA and edit it from there. Now, this code can be used on all your workbooks if you save it in your personal macro workbook, or you can also save it in a workbook itself and save that workbook as a macro-enabled workbook. Now, this is an introduction to macros where it will give you an idea of where you can access the VB editor, add the developer tab, as well as look at bits of code and read them to you so we understand what lines are being read to us. Now, keep in mind that with this course, you do need to have the developer tab inside of Excel in order to record a macro, the developer tab. And if you don't have it, all you need to do is do a quick little right click on any tab that you have, and you can choose to customize the ribbon. Now, when you do customize the ribbon, what you can do is ensure that your developer tab is checkmarked on and that you have it and that you can hit OK and you're ready to go and should see it back there. I highly recommend you to pause this video, and if you don't have the developer tab, to really quickly just do exactly what I did with a right click and customize the ribbon and make sure to checkmark on the developer and hit OK. Because once you do have the developer tab, you're going to notice that we have two very important command groups that we want to cover: the code command group and the controls command group. Let's start out with the code command group here, because I want to record a very basic macro just to teach us the basic concepts and how we can access our VB editor. What I want to do is I want to record myself adding my name, my company, and the current date inside of these cells. And once I record myself, I want to go ahead and just click a combination of keys or a button on my spreadsheet to add that for me. Now, keep in mind, this is a very basic example, and we'll look at the code that has been written out for us, and we'll analyze how we can edit that code and how we need to save this workbook. Now, something very important to notice, though, is with your macros, you have two ways to record them. And one of the ways that I like to use is relative referencing, to where although we've recorded the macro inside of A1 and A2 and A3, because we use relative referencing, we can use the macro on any column of data. And we can end up having our header show up in another column if we choose to, or on another chunk of our spreadsheet if we choose to. Now, if you don't have this on, like right now I've turned it on, what you're going to do is you're going to force your code to hard code the values. It's always going to make the values go into wherever you type them when you are recording. Now, to be more flexible, I'm going to make sure that relative referencing is turned on, and then from there I'm going to record my macro. Hopefully we're a little quiet. Shh, while I record. That's just a joke. You don't have to be quiet. But what I want to do here is once I record it, I'm going to give it a name in a shortcut. And then I'm going to show you the code that has been written out once I record this inside of my macro library when I step in and edit my code. I'm going to go ahead and hit record over here. And I'm just going to call this one my first macro. And for this keyboard shortcut, I'm going to do Control-Shift, and I'm going to do the letter M for macro, and I'm going to make sure to add in the shift key to my shortcut so that way I don't have to overwrite one of my pre-existing shortcuts that I'm using. Not a lot of them use shift. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a little description, a header, and that's all it's going to have is your name, your company, and the date. And when you hit OK, it's going to say stop recording up top. Now inside of cell A1, I'm going to go ahead and add in my name, and I'm going to add in my company name. And I'm also going to add in the date, but I'm going to use a formula, or I should say a function, equal today, to go ahead and put in the correct date for me every day that I spread and run this macro. Now that I have my header macro built, what I'm going to do here is click back on A1. I always like to end where I started, and I'm going to stop recording this macro. Now what this means is now every time I hit Control-Shift-M, I'm going to make this column bigger a little bit. Every time I hit Control-Shift-M, you're going to see that the data set is automatically coming up. Control-Shift-M, my macro has been recorded successfully. Now I do want you to pause this video and see if you can record a macro using absolute referencing turned on, and just make your name, your company name, and the date using equal today. And once you've done that, hit stop recording. And just go to check to see if your macro works with the shortcut that you've assigned. Mine seems all fine and dandy. Looking good, looking good. I hope you are successful at creating your macro, but it's very important to note that now that you have a Visual Basic project inside of this workbook, it's important to go to your File tab and to save it as a macro-enabled workbook. Now when you choose to save the Excel workbook, all we have to do is save it as a macro-enabled workbook. That way the VB project, the code, will also be saved as a script. And when I hit save over here, and anytime I email this workbook or I share it out, the code will also be shared out too, and they'll have access to that as well. Now let me go ahead and take a look at the code. I'm going to take a look at my macro library here, my macro library. And over here it's showing me my first macro, and I'm going to choose to edit this code. I'm going to edit this code. And it ends up opening up our Visual Basic Editor, which is right over here, our Visual Basic Editor. And I just want to show you how it shows us our VB project with all of our worksheets, and it shows us our code module that we have, inside the workbook. Now, of course, if you're a VB programmer, you can choose to build your own modules and rename them from here and give them, properties that we have. But let's just take a look at this code that we have a little bit. It's letting us know about a sub-process called my first macro. And all these little green things are actually going to be comments. So it's not a real line of code, it's just an apostrophe. And that little apostrophe that we add in is making it into a comment, and which makes it green to signify that. Now what VBA is actually doing is in each line of code, it's grabbing an object and it's using something known as a method to apply to that object, and then we're using that to type inside of the cell. So I've typed in Faz Kareem using the formula R1C1 method on the active cell object. And then on this active cell that I was on, I did an offset of 1 row and 0 columns from range A1 that I had selected. And then I did the same thing and I typed in Learnit. And when I hit enter, I did another offset to the active cell. And then I typed in today. At the very end, I went back up 2 rows to a -2 offset, and I ended the subroutine. Now the reason why I show this here is because you can make quick, simple edits from the VB editor directly from here if you need to. Like I'm just editing my company name to capitalize the it part. And I'm also going to go ahead and just capitalize the K in my name. And I'm just going to hit save to save those changes that I've done to my VB project. Cool, just save that there. I'm going to close it out. Now the next time I run my macro Control-Shift-M, you're going to notice that those changes have been added to my macro. What I want you to try doing is pausing this video, try to see if you can access your macro from your macro library, from the macro library there, and choose to edit your macro. Now once you edit it and you open up the VB editor, make sure to actually save the changes that you do before closing it out. When you do that, don't forget to press play and come right back, because I still have a little bit more goodies that I want to show you, like the step in function. Alrighty, welcome back. Hopefully you had a little fun editing your macro. Now that we've edited the macro, something that I'm a big fan of here is I'm going to click on this cell, C8, to start it out, just a random blank cell. And I'm going to use something known as the step in function. For my first macro, I'm going to choose to step in the function here. And when you have larger macros, what you can end up doing here is you can go step by step, and you can see each line of code being run, starting out the yellow. Now I'm going to end up hitting F8 on my keyboard, F8, to go to the next step. So when I hit F8, it goes down to my very first line of code inside the subprocess, starting with C8. And when I hit F8, it's going to run that line. So now it ran the line of code that actually put inside of it Faz Kareem. So it ran that line. Now it's on the offset line. And when I hit F8, it will run it, and it will go down to this blank cell here. Now for this cell, it's going to use the formula R1C1 method, and it's going to add in Learnit. And I'm going to go ahead and hit F8 to put that value in. And when I hit F8 to step in, it's going to show me that the next line hits enter. And if I hit F8 one more time, it puts in the date. Alrighty, hopefully you had a little fun stepping into your macros and seeing what each line of code actually does. Now that we actually have a macro, I'm going to go to my developer tab and I want to introduce the controls command group. So we have an insert option and we can insert a button, an actual button that we can click to run our macro instead of using the shortcut. Now keep in mind that if you're on a Mac, you only have ActiveX controls, and that requires you to type out your VBA code or paste it into the button. But on a PC, you have form controls, and you can choose a button and you can draw it on your spreadsheet to assign a macro to it. And I'm going to do that for myself. I'm going to assign, and I'm going to draw this button out, and I'm going to assign my first macro and hit OK. Now keep in mind that this button is editable. If you right-click it, you can rename it. Maybe I want to change the name of this button to header. And maybe if you want to move it around, you can as well. You just got to right-click first, and then go to the angle to move it around. Now you've just added a form control that allows you to run your macro using this button. So if anyone's unfamiliar with that keyboard shortcut, they can use this here. I do want you to pause this video and try inserting a form control on this intro to macro sheet with the header macro that you just created before I demonstrate a nice little example of a formatting macro. Pause the video and add this little button. Come right back. Alrighty, welcome back everybody. Now that we've seen how macros are run and how we can edit them and how we're supposed to save them, what I want to do is build a macro that formats this spreadsheet. Now this spreadsheet is something I deal with every month. Maybe next month I might receive the same amount of data, and maybe some months I might end up getting more data with more rows that I have. I want to record this macro, maybe a little bit of customization in color. I want to have some color here. That way every time I send off the spreadsheet, I can quickly add in my macro, format it, and then send it off on its way. Now I'm going to record my macro here, and I'm going to call this one my format macro, and I'm going to use Control-Shift. I'm going to hit the Shift key and the letter F for format, and I'm going to put format, the data, in sales, and I'm going to hit OK. Now with this macro here, I'm going to take advantage of our styles here. I'm going to go to the Home tab, and for cell A1, I'm going to style that up over to a title. And when I hit Enter, I'm going to style up this next one, the heading, to a heading 4. And every time I hit Enter, remember I'm doing an offset. And I'm going to hit Tab, doing another offset. And I'm going to use the equal today formula to go ahead and put in the date. And I'm going to hit Tab, and I'm going to put my initials, FK. And when I hit Enter here, I'm going to take advantage of the Control-Shift to the right shortcut and the Control-Shift down shortcut so that I can separate the highlighting. That way next month if I have more columns, it can highlight it. And next month if I have more rows, it can highlight it. And I'm just going to go over to my cell styles here. And for my cell style, I'm going to make it a 20% accent for the actual data. Now that I've actually formatted this spreadsheet with a little bit of color here, and I've added the title and the headings, I'm going to hit Control and the Home key to go back to cell A1. And then from there, I'm going to stop recording. Now keep in mind the macro that we just built, my format macro, it's inside of your workbook. And all the code that you've written out is going to be stored inside the VB editor here. Now keep in mind, if you want to use this macro on another spreadsheet, you have multiple ways of doing that. Maybe you want to do next month's data now. Of course, we have that form control that we have where you can assign the form control, my format macro, and hit OK. And then I can format cells, and it works all fine and dandy. But keep in mind that I also have a keyboard shortcut where I can click on cell A1 and hit Control-Shift and then the letter F for format. And because I used the highlight shortcut, it highlighted the continuing data. Now I can also go ahead and if I forgot to add a keyboard shortcut, let's say I missed out on it, I can head up to my developer tab and click on my macro library. And for my format macro, I can choose to run it. And now that I've run it, keep in mind that your undo will not undo a macro. These macros are done and completed. Now it's very important to not modify the original copy if you're unsure the macro is not going to work, or if you're unsure if it's going to work. So it's very important to realize that you're going to make a copy while you're testing macros because the undo button is not available. I do want you to try out this format macro. I do admit you will have to use keyboard shortcuts while you're recording it. And I just want you to check to see if it will work on larger data sets based off how you recorded it. All right. Congratulations. I want to point out that we've successfully completed both Module 1 our VLOOKUPs, and our advanced pivot table techniques, as well as Module 2, where we covered our arrays, advanced conditional formatting, charts, as well as back rows.